The crime you committed is your existence. The officer's voice tore through the stillness of the midnight air, aimed squarely at a black man who had stopped to pump gas. No reason, no justification, only slurs. Then handcuffs were drawn. In seconds the two officers slammed the black man hard against the hood of his car. But the moment they reached the station and realized who he truly was, they hurried to let him go. By then, though, any trace of remorse was meaningless. The trial that would shake the entire city was about to begin. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thought. The courtroom was packed so tight you could feel the air strain under its own weight. Reporters lined the back wall. Every seat was filled. Every phone camera was up and waiting. At the front sat Judge Carter Brooks, the black robe crisp, his expression unreadable. He didn't look like a man delivering routine justice. He looked like someone who had already lived through the verdict. At the defense table sat Officer Derek Collins and Officer Jason Miller, both white, both staring straight ahead, jaws tight, hands folded. Between them, their attorney whispered something quick and rehearsed, but neither man reacted. Their focus was locked on the judge. Carter adjusted his glasses and let the silence sit heavy for a beat too long. He wanted them to feel it. The weight of being seen, the way he'd been seen that night. Finally he spoke. His voice was calm, steady, almost too quiet for the room. "I recognize you both." A few heads turned. The whisper of phones recording grew louder. "Perhaps next time," he continued, removing his glasses and setting them carefully on the bench, "you'll check a man's ID before throwing him face first onto the pavement." The words landed like gunfire in a church. A wave of gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. One of the officers shifted in his chair, his knuckles whitening against the wood. Their lawyer rose quickly. "Your Honor, with all due respect." "Save it," Carter said, his tone even, almost polite. "You'll have your turn." The lawyer froze. Even the bailiff paused mid-step. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Carter leaned slightly forward, his gaze locked on the two men below him. Not as a judge, not as a victim, but as someone deciding what kind of man he was about to be. "This courtroom exists for one reason," he said slowly, clearly. "To separate truth from convenience. And today, gentlemen, truth is not on your side." Nobody spoke. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts. Collins' eyes dropped to the table. Miller's jaw flexed as if he were grinding his teeth to keep from speaking. From the gallery someone whispered, "That's him. That's the judge they arrested." The realization moved through the room like static. Carter straightened the stack of case files in front of him, tapping them twice, a small habit he'd carried for years to anchor his hands. Then he looked directly at the defendants, his expression unreadable. "We'll begin shortly," he said, voice calm. "But before we do, everyone in this room deserves to know how we got here." He paused, letting the silence sink in again. "Because justice," he said quietly, "always starts with the truth." The bailiff's voice echoed, "All rise," and as the room stood, the image began to fade, the sharp light of the courtroom dissolving into the flicker of a gas station sign on a wet Virginia night. The Sunco Mart sat on the edge of Arlington County, half lit, half forgotten, the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and tired engines. A flickering neon sign buzzed overhead. Open 24 hours. It was late, 11:47 p.m., and Carter Brooks just wanted to go home. He'd spent the last 12 hours at Johns Hopkins Hospital, sitting beside his father's bed while surgeons worked through the night. When the doctor finally said, "He's stable now, Judge Brooks," Carter had felt his first real breath all day. He'd taken off the suit hours ago, folded it neatly in the back seat. Now he wore a dark hoodie, jeans and sneakers. Nothing special, just comfort. But to someone else, it would look like something else entirely. He slid his card into the pump, the machine chirping in the quiet. Gas flowed. The night hummed. The air smelled faintly of rain and asphalt. Then headlights flashed across his mirror. A police cruiser rolled into the lot slow, too slow, circling once like it was checking for prey. Carter didn't move, didn't look up. He kept his eyes on the pump numbers climbing. The cruiser stopped directly behind him, boxing him in. Two doors opened. Officer Derek Collins, tall, buzz-cut, late 30s, face carved into suspicion. Officer Jason Miller, his partner, younger, restless, still chewing gum like it owed him money. Colin's flashlight snapped on, cutting through the dark and catching Carter in its beam. Even in Collins called out. The words sounded more like a warning than a greeting. You live around here? Carter didn't turn. Just getting gas, officer. Collins circled closer. Bit late for that, don't you think? Long night at the hospital, heading home. Miller walked around the BMW, peering through the windows like he was inspecting a crime scene. Nice car, he said, loud enough for his partner to hear. Guess crime really does pay. Carter's jaw tightened. Excuse me, Miller grinned. Relax, I'm just saying. Not every day you see a Beamer in this part of town without stolen plates. They're not stolen, Carter said evenly. You can run them if you'd like. Collins tilted his head, stepping in close, flashlight still in Carter's face. We've had reports of a suspect in the area, he said. You match the description. What description? Carter asked, voice calm. Black male, medium build, hoodie. Carter blinked, then gave a short dry laugh. Yeah, that narrows it down. Collins' eyes sharpened. You think this is funny? No sir, just statistically interesting. Don't get smart with me. Collins snapped. Let's see some ID. Carter took a slow breath. Can I ask why I'm being stopped? Because I said so, Collins shot back. That's your reason. Miller chuckled from behind the car. Man, these people always got an attitude. Always a lecture before cooperation. Carter froze. These people. Miller smirked. Yeah, you know what I mean. Always the same story. Innocent until the cuffs come out. Carter straightened, his tone firm but polite. My wallet's in my back pocket. I'm reaching for it now. Do it slow, Collins barked. Carter moved carefully, pulling out his wallet and flipping it open. My name is Carter Brooks. I'm a federal judge with the D.C. Circuit Court. Collins let out a sharp laugh. Yeah, and I'm the goddamn mayor. You can check the ID. Oh, I will, Collins said, snatching it from his hand. He squinted at the badge, turning it under the light. This supposed to impress me. You think you're better than the rest of us? No, Carter said quietly. Just asking to be treated the same. Miller let out a low whistle. You hear that, Derek? He wants equality. That's cute. Collins' grin faded, his tone dropped an octave. You know what your problem is? Guys like you get a little education, a little title, and suddenly you think you're untouchable. He stepped in closer, breath hot against Carter's face. But out here, you're just another mouthy black man in a hoodie. I've done nothing wrong, Carter said, jaw tight. You think quoting law makes you special? Collins hissed. Before Carter could respond, Collins grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. The pump nozzle clattered to the ground, gas splattering across the concrete. Hey, what are you doing? Stop resisting. I'm not resisting. Miller moved in, one hand hovering near his holster, the other snapping cuffs over Carter's wrists with a hard click. Typical, Miller muttered. They never shut up till they hit the floor. You're assaulting a sitting judge, Carter said through gritted teeth. Collins leaned in, voice low. Not tonight, you're not. Tonight you're just another suspect who talked too much. From across the lot, a woman's voice rang out. Hey, I'm recording this. A young white woman stood near a silver Honda, phone raised high, the red light blinking. Ma'am, step back. Miller barked. This doesn't concern you. He's not doing anything, she shouted. You can't just, lady. Collins snapped. You want to spend the night in county too. She froze but kept the camera steady. Inside the store, Mr. Khan, the South Asian owner, burst out the door. Officers, please, I know this man, he's a regular. A customer. Get back inside. Collins barked. Before you interfere with an investigation. Khan hesitated, terrified. Carter caught his eye. Call the courthouse, he said, steady despite the cuffs. Judge Raymond Ellis. Tell him what's happening. Khan nodded quickly and backed away. Collins shoved Carter toward the cruiser. The cuffs bit deeper with every step. You're making a big mistake, Carter said. No, Collins sneered, pushing him into the back seat. The mistake was thinking you mattered. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the metal roof as the cruiser pulled out of the lot. From the back seat, Carter saw the woman still filming, her face pale, her phone trembling. Miller glanced at his partner. Another one crying racism, he said. Maybe he can sue us and buy another BMW. Collins laughed under his breath. Let him, no one's gonna believe a story like that. Carter stared straight ahead, as the gas station faded behind them, neon lights shrinking into the rain. Ahead, a road sign glowed through the storm. Welcome to Arlington County, a safe community for all. He let out a slow, bitter breath. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure what safe meant anymore. The Arlington Police Department was lit like a hospital, cold, white, merciless. A motivational poster hung behind the front desk. Integrity, service, respect. It might as well have been graffiti. Carter Brooks shuffled through the hallway, wrists cuffed behind him. His right cheek burned from where it had hit the cruiser door. Collins and Miller walked beside him, not rushing, letting every uniform they passed get a good look. Whispers followed them like a bad smell. At the intake desk sat Sergeant Harlan, thick-necked, mid-50s, eyes dull from too many night shifts and too little empathy. He didn't even look up when he said, "What do we got?" "Possible match to a gas station robbery," Collins said easily. Black male mid-40s, medium build, got twitchy when we approached. Twitchy, Harlan repeated, smirking. That usually means mouthy. Miller chuckled. Oh, he's got a PhD. Says he's a federal judge. That got Harlan's attention. He looked up, finally taking in Carter, the blood on his temple, the cuffs cutting into his wrists. A judge, huh? You don't look like one. Carter's voice stayed steady. D.C. Circuit Court. I have identification. Not what I asked, Harlan cut in. I asked what court, not where. See, real judges don't hesitate when you ask that. Carter exhaled slowly. Criminal division. Harlan snorted. Yeah, I bet. Criminal for sure. A few quiet laughs rippled from the nearby officers, laughter that didn't need to be loud to humiliate. Carter tried again. I'd like to make a phone call. My colleague Judge Raymond Ellis can verify who I am. You'll get your call when we say you do. Collins interrupted. Right now you're being processed. Processed for what? Suspicious conduct. Loitering. Take your pick, Miller said, his smirk never fading. Harlan slid a clipboard across the counter. Empty your pockets. I can't, Carter said. I'm handcuffed. Harlan leaned back in his chair, grinning like a man enjoying a show. Then I guess you'll need some help. Collins uncuffed him roughly. The metal scraped his skin. Go on, Collins said. Let's see what the honorable judge is packing tonight. Carter emptied his pockets. Wallet, keys, phone, a hospital parking stub, a roll of breath mints, each motion deliberate, measured. Miller snatched up the wallet, flipping through it like he was looking for a joke. Driver's license, credit cards, he whistled. Platinum Amex. Guess being on the government payroll pays off, huh? That's enough, Carter said quietly. Relax, man, Miller said, grinning wider. Just making conversation. You people usually love to talk money. The air went heavy. Harlan grabbed the judicial ID, squinting at it like a fake coupon. This looks fancy. Probably fake. What you think, Derek? Could be, Collins said. They sell fake IDs online now. Make him look real enough for wannabes. Carter's jaw tightened. That's a state-issued credential. You can verify it in the federal database. Database? Harlan laughed. You think we got time to play tech support for every guy claiming to be a judge? You ain't special. I'm not asking for special treatment, Carter said, voice calm but sharp. Just the law. Harlan leaned in, breath sour with coffee and power. That's the problem, ain't it? Guys like you always think the law's on your side, until it's not. Miller snickered. He probably thinks we're scared to touch him. Educated ones are the worst. Forget where they came from. Carter met his eyes. I know exactly where I came from. Do you? The room froze. Collins stepped closer, voice low, threatening. Watch your tone, Judge. You're not behind a bench now. Harlan slapped a form on the counter. Enough. Belt off, shoes off, standard intake. Carter hesitated. You have my ID, you know who I am. There's no legal basis for detainment. And yet here you are, Harlan said, smiling thinly. Shoes, Your Honor. The silence burned hotter than anger. Carter unbuckled his belt and removed his shoes, placing them neatly beside the counter. His socks met the chill of the concrete. He stood straight, refusing to hunch. Miller raised his phone, snapping a quick photo. Gotta document this for training purposes. Delete that, Carter said, voice sharp. Relax, Miller muttered. No one's gonna see it, unless you start running your mouth. Harlan finally looked closer at the ID. Something in his face changed. Hold up. He picked up the phone, dialing an extension. Captain Dempsey, you might want to come down here. We got a situation. What situation? Collins asked, frowning. Harlan covered the receiver. Says here he's actually a sitting judge. Miller froze. You're joking. Do I sound like I'm joking? Moments later, Captain Dempsey swept into the room, polished, controlled, every hair in place. His smile was pure PR. Judge Brooks, what an unfortunate misunderstanding. Carter turned toward him, barefoot, wrists raw. Unfortunate's one word for it. I'm sure we can clear this up. You already did, Carter cut in. When your officers twisted my arm, ignored my ID, and cuffed me for buying gas. Dempsey's smile flickered. Let's take this to my office, Judge. We can talk privately. No, Carter said flatly. The law says I get one phone call. I'll make it right here. The room went silent. Dempsey nodded stiffly. Of course, use the main line. Carter lifted the receiver, dialing without hesitation. Raymond, it's Carter. I'm at Arlington PD. I need you to contact Chief Justice Warren and the U.S. Marshal's office. Tell them exactly what happened. No one spoke. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. When he hung up, he faced Dempsey. Captain, I expect this to be reported accurately. No edits, no omissions. Of course, Judge Brooks, Dempsey said, voice tight. Behind them, Collins muttered under his breath. You people always want a damn record when it's your turn. Carter turned his head slowly, eyes locked. You people. Collins looked away. Miller swallowed hard. The door opened. Officer Miles Turner, the young black rookie, stepped in. He'd seen the headlines flashing across the station monitors. Judge Brooks, he said carefully, if you'd like, I can drive you home. Carter nodded once. Thank you, Officer Turner. As they walked out, the silence behind them was heavier than any apology could carry. Harlan stood frozen. Dempsey rubbed his temples. Miller muttered, guess we picked the wrong one this time. No one laughed. Outside, the night air hit Carter's face, sharp and cold. He sat on the cruiser's edge, slipping his shoes back on, tying the laces slowly, deliberately. You okay, sir? Turner asked quietly. I will be, Carter said. He looked up at the glowing sign above the door. Arlington Police Department, to protect and serve. His jaw tightened. Tomorrow, he said quietly, we'll see what that actually means. He stepped into the car, the door closing with a soft final click, the sound of a man crossing a line he would never uncross. And with that, he stepped into the car, the door closing with a soft final click, the sound of a man crossing a line he could never uncross. The night after the arrest felt longer than any Carter could remember. He hadn't slept, not really. The video didn't explode overnight. It simmered. Someone had uploaded it around midnight. A shaky 37-second clip, labeled Police Harass Man at Arlington Gas Station. At first, it barely moved. A few reposts, a handful of angry comments. By morning though, it had found legs. By noon it had found an audience. By the next day it had found the world. At 7:30 a.m., Carter Brooks sat at the kitchen table, still in the same shirt from the night before. His phone buzzed with notifications, news alerts, missed calls, messages piling up faster than he could swipe them away. The same video replayed on loop, the flash of headlights. Collins' voice barking, you people think you're special. The sound of his own voice saying calmly, I'm a federal judge. Then the shove, the cuffs, the silence. He watched it once, then again. By the third time, his jaw tightened and his eyes had gone flat, like he was watching someone else's humiliation instead of his own. Across the kitchen, Vanessa scrolled through her phone, brow furrowed. Her face, tired, elegant, composed, was drawn tight with worry. It's spreading, Carter, she said quietly. Every platform, Twitter, Facebook, news blogs, everyone's got an opinion. Carter looked up slowly. What are they saying? Vanessa hesitated. Some people are furious, calling for the officer's suspension. Others, she trailed off, not wanting to say it. Others think you staged it, that you were looking for attention, that you wanted to make a point. Carter's lips pressed into a thin line. Of course they do. You know how it goes, she said softly. When it's one of us, they always find a reason we deserved it. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples, staring at the cold cup of coffee in front of him. The sunlight spilling through the blinds felt too bright, too sharp. Vanessa finally shut off the kitchen TV and turned to him. You haven't said a word since you got home. Talk to me. Carter stayed quiet for a long moment. His eyes were fixed on the window, watching their son's basketball hoop swaying slightly in the breeze. You remember the excessive force complaint scheduled for Thursday? He asked finally, voice low. Vanessa nodded cautiously. Yes, the one with that young woman, Rachel Miles. He nodded once. The officers she filed against were Derek Collins and Jason Miller. Vanessa blinked. For a moment she didn't move, then slowly sank into the chair across from him. Carter, no. Yes. His voice was calm, but there was a tired weight beneath it. The same two men who put me in handcuffs will be sitting in my courtroom 3 days from now. She stared at him, disbelief softening into fear. You can't preside over that case now. Not after this. Everyone's seen the video. He looked at her then, not angry, just resolute. If I recuse myself, it says I can't be impartial because I'm black. It says you're smart enough to protect yourself, she countered. They'll twist this. They'll say you're out for revenge, that you're using the bench for payback. Carter's hands curled into fists on the table. So what? I step down, and they walk free. The same officers who humiliated me, who humiliated her. This isn't about pride, she said gently. It's about survival. They'll call you biased, vindictive. They already are, he cut in. The words hung between them, cold and heavy. Vanessa's eyes softened. You can still take yourself off the case quietly. No one would blame you. He shook his head slowly. If I do that, it tells every person who's ever been profiled that justice only works when it's convenient. I can't do that, Vanessa. She studied him for a long time, seeing the exhaustion beneath the steel in his expression, the dark circles, the clenched jaw, the small tremor in his hands. Then she exhaled, defeated but understanding. Then promise me one thing, she said quietly. Be careful, because this isn't just a courtroom fight anymore. It's politics, and politics eats people like us alive. Carter gave a faint nod, his gaze drifting back to the screen on the table, the paused frame of his arrest. 2 officers, 2 sets of eyes that had looked through him like he was invisible. He didn't look away this time. They picked the wrong man, he murmured. Outside the city moved on, horns blaring, sirens wailing somewhere in the distance. But inside the Brooks home, everything had gone still. The man who'd been thrown into the back of a cruiser 2 days ago was gone. The one walking out now had work to finish. Then the knock came just after dusk. 3 heavy raps, firm, measured, deliberate. The kind of knock that didn't ask permission. It expected obedience. Carter Brooks looked up from his desk. His study was dim, lit only by the brass lamp beside a stack of legal briefs. The room smelled of burnt coffee and rain-soaked air drifting in through a cracked window. He hadn't changed clothes since morning. His tie was loose, sleeves rolled, the exhaustion around his eyes doing nothing to dull the sharpness in them. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, tightening the belt of her robe. Who knocks like that at this hour? Before Carter could answer, she was already halfway down the hall. 2 men in tailored suits waited on the porch, the kind of suits that said Washington, not Arlington. Between them stood a third, Commissioner Frank Dempsey, head of the Arlington Police Department, wearing his full uniform, and a smile so thin it looked painted on. The taller man in the suit smiled first, a tight politician's smile. Good evening, Mrs. Brooks. We appreciate you taking a moment. We'd like to speak with your husband. Just a few minutes. Vanessa hesitated. The unease in her eyes said everything. Before she could answer, Carter's voice came from behind her, calm but edged. Gentlemen, he said, stepping forward. I assume this isn't a social call. Dempsey's fake grin widened. Judge Brooks,
"May we come in? We'd rather not discuss official business on your doorstep." Vanessa started to object, but Carter lifted a hand. "It's fine." The three men entered like they were walking into their own boardroom, scanning the house as they passed, the framed degrees, the family photos, the faint jazz humming from the radio in the corner. The taller man spoke first, his voice dripping with bureaucratic charm. "Thomas Halbrook, Deputy Director of State Judicial Affairs. This is Deputy Attorney General Miles. We're here purely as a courtesy." "A courtesy," Carter repeated, crossing his arms. "That what we're calling intimidation now?" Halbrook chuckled softly, like someone amused by a child's defiance. "Nothing like that, sir. We just want to make sure this unfortunate misunderstanding doesn't spiral." "Unfortunate," Carter repeated, his voice dry. "That's one way to describe being cuffed in public, by two of your officers. Then maybe you should have called instead of showing up uninvited," Carter said. Dempsey finally spoke, his tone lower, smoother, too smooth. "We're all part of the same system, Judge. The public looks to us, police, courts, government, to hold the line together. A united front keeps order." Carter's expression didn't move. "A united front," yes, Dempsey said carefully. "The public doesn't need another story about division in law enforcement or the judiciary. It weakens faith in our institutions, in us." Carter stared at him for a long moment, the silence stretching thin. Then quietly, "Faith in our institutions didn't get me home that night, Captain. My colleague did, after your officers decided to play God in a gas station parking lot. The department's under public fire, Judge. Protests, op-eds, political chatter. The governor's already been briefed, and well," he glanced at Dempsey, "people want assurance that the judiciary won't turn this into a witch hunt." Carter's lips twitched. Not a smile, not quite anger. "A witch hunt? Your officers handcuffed a sitting federal judge, on video. The only hunt here is for accountability."
Dempsey sighed, resting his cap on the arm of the chair. "You're emotional, and I get it. But this thing," he gestured vaguely, as if the racial dimension were too impolite to name, "it's not good for anyone. You, us, the courts. The community needs calm, not another headline about race in law enforcement." Vanessa stiffened at the word race. She folded her arms, eyes narrowing. "You mean it's not good for white officers who can't control themselves?" Halbrook's smile froze. "Mrs. Brooks, please. Let's keep this professional." "Professional," she said sharply. "My husband was assaulted, humiliated, and broadcast to millions. And you show up here asking him to tone it down for your comfort." Miles, the younger deputy, stepped in quickly, voice tense. "Ma'am, no one's minimizing what happened. But you have to understand the optics. A black federal judge presiding over the trial of the same two white officers who arrested him." Carter cut him off, voice low but steady. "Say it, you're worried it'll look bad for your side." The silence thickened. Dempsey finally met his gaze. "We're all part of the same system, Judge. The public expects law enforcement and the courts to stand together. The moment we start dividing ourselves, people lose faith." Carter took a slow step forward, his expression unreadable. "Faith," he said, "that's what you call it, because when I was face down on the concrete, your men weren't acting out of faith. They were acting out of habit." Dempsey's jaw tightened. "You're out of line." "No," Carter replied, his voice cutting through the room like glass. "I was out of line when your officers threw me on it." Halbrook stood, posture stiff, smile gone. "Judge Brooks, this isn't a threat, but if you continue on this path, you'll be forcing the system to pick sides. And in this country," he glanced toward Dempsey, his tone lowering, "the system doesn't lose to men like you." Vanessa's breath caught. "Men like him," she repeated, incredulous. "You mean black men who refuse to bow?" Miles' face flushed. "That's not what he meant." "It's exactly what he meant," Carter said quietly. He stepped closer, closing the space between himself and Halbrook until they were eye to eye. The younger man swallowed hard, his composure cracking for the first time. "You came here to make sure I stay quiet," Carter said, "to remind me where the power sits." He leaned in slightly, voice calm but searing. "But you're mistaken, power doesn't sit. It shifts. And when it shifts toward the truth, no title or badge will keep it from burning through liars." Halbrook's nostrils flared. "You're making a mistake, Judge." "No," Carter said. "I'm making history." Dempsey rose slowly, his stare colder now. "You're playing with fire, Brooks. And fire has a way of burning more than its target." Carter didn't blink. "Then maybe it's time someone stopped pretending the flames don't exist." The silence that followed was suffocating. Halbrook buttoned his jacket with clipped precision, motioning for the others to follow. They turned toward the door without another word. As they stepped outside, Dempsey looked back one last time, his expression stripped of civility. "You'll regret this, Judge. The system protects its own." Carter's voice came low, steady, final. "Then I guess I'll protect the truth." The door shut. Vanessa stood still for a long moment, then turned to him, eyes wide, voice trembling. "You just told off half the state's power structure in our living room." Carter sank into his chair, the weight of exhaustion pressing into his shoulders. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, speaking more to himself than to her. "They thought they were warning me. They have no idea what they just started." Outside, the SUVs idled for a moment, then rolled away into the darkness, red tail lights vanishing down the wet street. Inside, the house fell quiet again. Vanessa watched her husband, the lines of worry softening into something heavier, pride, maybe, or fear. Carter stared at the faint reflection of himself in the dark window. A man stripped of illusion, sharpened by purpose. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It was already here. The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. Thin streaks of water slid down the courthouse windows like veins under pale skin. The city outside buzzed, reporters staking out corners, activists holding signs, anonymous voices online turning Carter Brooks into a headline instead of a man. But inside his chambers, the world was quiet. Too quiet. A desk lamp glowed over stacks of case files, manila folders, and coffee rings that looked like burn marks on official paper. Carter sat hunched forward, sleeves rolled up, eyes red from hours of reading. He'd been at it since dawn, combing through complaints, disciplinary records, internal memos, anything with the names Collins and Miller on them. Every file smelled like bureaucracy, stale, sanitized, designed to bury truth under procedure. But he was good at digging. He always had been. The clock read 11:47 p.m. when someone knocked. A single hesitant tap, not like the confident fists of power from 2 nights ago. This one was cautious, almost afraid. Carter opened the door to find Judge Raymond Ellis, his oldest friend and colleague, standing there in a raincoat, holding a folder under his arm. "You look like hell," Raymond said. "Thanks," Carter muttered. "I've been practicing." Raymond closed the door behind him, shaking off the rain. His face was lined, his eyes sharp, the kind of sharp that came from too many years of believing the system could fix itself. "I heard about your little visit from the brass," he said. "You could have called me before you decided to tell the entire establishment to go to hell. Would you have told me not to?" "No," Raymond said after a beat. "But I'd have brought popcorn." For the first time in days, Carter almost smiled. Almost. Raymond tossed the folder onto the desk. "I pulled what I could from the Internal Affairs database. You're not going to like it." Carter opened it. Pages of complaints, all eerily similar, blackmail. Routine stop. Aggressive response. Dismissed, dozens of them. All connected to Collins and Miller. "Jesus," Carter whispered. "It gets worse," Raymond said. Internal Affairs marked most of these unsubstantiated. The words everywhere, like its policy. Carter flipped another page, scanning signatures, seeing the same name over and over at the bottom of each dismissal. Captain Dempsey. His stomach tightened. He signed off on all of these. Raymond nodded grimly. "You see the pattern now." Carter leaned back, rubbing his temples. "They've been running this racket for years. Harass, file, bury, repeat." Raymond's voice dropped lower. "It's not just harassment. One of my clerks used to date a guy in precinct records. He said there's a phrase floating around the department. Boost the numbers. Supposedly comes from the top. Boost the numbers. Yeah, means make more arrests in high crime zones, but everyone on the inside knows what that really means. Target black neighborhoods. They call it increasing visibility." Carter's jaw locked. His fingers dug into the edge of the desk. "So this isn't just 2 bad cops. It's a system feeding itself. Raymond nodded again, then hesitated before adding, there's something else. Officer Miller reached out to me anonymously. He left a voicemail on my office line. Said he's got proof, a recording. Claims the command staff ordered them to meet monthly targets by any means necessary. Carter froze mid-motion. He said that. He didn't sound proud of it. Raymond said quietly. Said he's scared, thinks he's being watched. Told me if anything happens to him, the evidence is hidden in his locker at the station. The rain outside hit harder, the rhythm picking up like a pulse. Carter stood, pacing the room, the weight of it pressing in. They think I'm going to play nice, he said. That I'll walk into that courtroom and pretend none of this exists. Raymond crossed his arms, watching him. You're not going to, are you? No, then we'll do this right. Raymond said, stepping closer. We'll pull the thread until the whole damn thing unravels. But you need to be careful, they'll come for you harder now. You embarrassed them. That doesn't go unpunished. Carter's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes flickered. Not fear, exactly. Resolve. Let them come. He turned back to the window. Rain distorted the city lights into smears of gold and gray. Somewhere out there, the truth was hiding, buried under reports, silence, and the comfort of those who thought justice was negotiable. Get me everything on that recording, Carter said. If Miller's telling the truth, we'll drag this into the open. Raymond studied his friend, the dark circles, the clenched jaw, the quiet fury, and nodded. All right, but remember, once you start, there's no going back. Carter didn't look away from the window. There never was. The two men stood in silence as thunder rolled across the city. Outside, somewhere in the maze of streets and shadows, a frightened cop sat on a secret that could tear the department apart. And for the first time in days, Carter felt something new, not hope exactly, but the faint scent of blood in the water. The courthouse looked different in the mornings now. What used to be routine had turned into ritual. Cameras outside, whispers inside, every hallway echoing with speculation. People didn't just walk past Judge Carter Brooks anymore. They watched him. Some nodded in silent support. Others looked away, afraid of being seen agreeing with him. Carter ignored them all. He moved through the corridors like a soldier before battle, calm on the outside, calculating underneath. 3 days until the trial. 3 days until everything cracked open. His office was a mess of case files and coffee cups, the air thick with the smell of rain-soaked paper and exhaustion. On the wall behind him, newspaper headlines were pinned like evidence in a murder board. The gas station judge, justice or vendetta. Federal case tests racial bias in law enforcement. He hated them all. Vanessa stood by the window, watching the reporters outside the courthouse steps. Her voice was low, strained. They've started camping out overnight. News vans, local press, even international media. Carter, this isn't just a case anymore, it's a storm. He didn't look up from the files. Then I'll walk through it. You sound like you don't care what happens to you. I care, he said, flipping a page. Just not about me. She exhaled, arms crossed tight. You can't fight the whole system alone. I'm not, he said quietly. Raymond's helping. So is someone else. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Officer Miles Turner, the young black rookie from that night, stepped inside, plain clothes this time, looking uneasy but determined. He set a flash drive on the desk. It's all there, sir, he said. Footage from the precinct's internal cameras. You'll want to see it before anyone else does. Carter stared at the drive, then at Turner. How did you get this? Let's just say not everyone in that department sleeps easy anymore. Vanessa glanced between them. If they find out you leaked that, they won't, Turner said quickly. But they're getting nervous, sir, real nervous, and there's talk. He hesitated. Word is someone higher up told Collins and Miller to take the fall quietly. Carter frowned. What do you mean? I mean they're being pressured not to talk. To say it was a misunderstanding. In return they'll get transferred, not fired. Raymond appeared in the doorway just then, trenchcoat half drenched from the rain. He's right, he said. I just got off the phone with a contact in internal affairs. Orders are coming down from the top. Dempsey's cleaning house, but only the visible parts.
Carter leaned back, rubbing his jaw. So they'll sacrifice 2 officers to protect everyone else. Exactly, Raymond said. Classic containment play. Keep the rot hidden, blame it on the few bad apples. Carter picked up the flash drive, turning it over in his fingers. Then we show the whole orchard. Raymond gave a dry laugh. You know they'll try to bury you for it. Then I'll make sure they have to do it in daylight. He slid the flash drive into his laptop. The screen came to life, a timestamp, a hallway view from the precinct. They watched in silence as Collins and Miller stood outside the captain's office. The sound was muffled, but the tone was clear: anger, fear, obedience. Then faintly through the static, a voice from inside the office barked, "Boost your numbers, I don't care how, focus on high-risk zones." You know what that means. Carter froze. Vanessa's hand covered her mouth. Raymond muttered a curse under his breath. It wasn't just circumstantial anymore, it was systemic, and it was recorded. Carter paused the video. The image froze mid-frame, Collins' face pale, Miller's jaw clenched, both looking like men realizing they were in too deep. He looked up, meeting Raymond's eyes. "We have enough to open an inquiry beyond this trial." "You sure you want to do that?" Raymond asked. "You'll be turning this into a full-scale war." "It's already a war," Carter said softly. "The difference is, now we have ammo." Outside thunder rolled again, rattling the windows. Vanessa touched his shoulder gently. "Promise me one thing," she whispered. "If this gets worse, if they come after you, don't try to fight it alone." He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the frozen video on the screen. The evidence that would either vindicate him or destroy him. Finally he nodded. "I'll handle it," he said, "but first we go to court." Raymond gave a grim smile. "Then we'd better be ready." Carter closed the laptop, slid the flash drive into his coat pocket, and stood. For the first time in days, his movements felt steady, certain. The fear was still. They started small. At first a name here, a rumor there, the kind of things people say in bars and barbershops, things that never make it into reports. Carter and Raymond leaned into those whispers. They followed phone numbers, old complaint forms, the thin trails people left when they were too scared to stay. The first woman they found was Monique Harris, 34, a mother, still wearing the fluorescent clinic jacket from her shift at the pediatric clinic. Her hands trembled when she sat down across from them, in a quiet conference room. She kept rubbing a bruise near her elbow as if she could smooth the memory away. "I was driving my kid home," she said, voice low. "It was dusk. I slowed down because the street was full of kids walking. Next thing I know, headlights behind me flashing." She pressed her thumb against the skin where the bruise showed. "They pulled me over." Collins got out and said, "You're in the wrong part of town to be slow, missy." He leaned into my car like he owned the steering wheel. She swallowed. Carter watched the way her jaw set, the tiny hard blink that betrayed how often she'd replayed it. "I asked them for a reason. He said I was suspicious, then he yanked me out of the car by my sweater, slammed me against the hood in front of my kid. The whole time he's calling me names. People in the neighborhood watched. No one called out the police, they were afraid. I filed a complaint. It took 6 months to get a letter, saying it was unsubstantiated." Monique's hands balled into fists as she spoke. She didn't need to say the rest. The way the system had handled her was written on her face. Carter took notes, notches of silence filling the space between her words. The next was Luis Alvarez, 21, a community college student, who still flinched when he pulled his sleeve down over his forearm. A hairline scar rose pale on his wrist. He showed them photos and X-ray with a clean break through the radius. "I was walking home from class," he said, "wallet in my front pocket, because I'd been on the bus. 2 cops stopped me 'cause they thought my hand looked suspicious." He laughed once, not a joke. "They told me to empty my pockets. I reached into my front pocket, and one of them just hit me in the arm. Broke my hand." Raymond's jaw tightened. Luis's eyes were steady when he said the name that mattered. "Collins and Miller. They slapped cuffs on me and drove off like we were trash. My complaint said resisted. The report said I reached for something in a way that looked aggressive. The hospital bill didn't say aggressive, it said compound fracture. They kept going. By the time the afternoon bled into evening, the list was longer than either of them had dared imagine. Mothers pulled from cars, students bruised, elders frisked for no reason, business owners told to move along, while young men were searched for non-existent contraband. The pattern was the point: the same officers, the same excuses, the same dismissals stamped unfounded in neat bureaucratic font. Then, just when hope and fatigue were balancing on a blade, Carter's phone vibrated on the table, an unknown number. He let it ring twice, and almost let it go to voicemail. Then curiosity, and a kind of desperate need for proof, made him answer. A voice came through, thin and raw. It was Jason Miller. "Judge Brooks, it's Miller." The name felt fragile on the line. The words trembled. "I don't want to do this wrong, but I can't keep doing it." When Miller arrived, he looked 10 years older than his badge said. His uniform was rumpled. His hands wouldn't stop moving. Thumb rubbing the edge of a USB stick, fingers worrying the plastic cap, like he could squeeze the secret out. He sat across from Carter and Raymond, and didn't meet either of their eyes at first. His voice was a thread, high and shaky. "It's not just us," he said. "There's a board in the captain's office. Maps, color pins. High-risk zones, they call it on the memo. Everyone knows what that really means. Black neighborhoods. We were told to boost our numbers, make stops, make arrests. It's all about reports now, activity metrics, promotions." He finally set the USB on the table, sliding it forward like evidence on a tray. The movement was small but full of consequences. "You should see this before it disappears," he said. "There are recordings, meetings, a memo with emails, names." His throat worked. "I'm done with lying to myself." Carter picked the stick up with 2 fingers. It was an ordinary thing. Gray plastic, a tiny logo, but the weight of what it might contain made his fingers steady and careful. Raymond leaned in, eyes hard as flint. Miller's confession spilled out in fits. How the boost the numbers language had come from a closed-door meeting. How captains and lieutenants measured patrols by monthly stop counts. How officers who didn't produce were moved to less desirable posts. He talked about jokes in the break room. How furtive movements became a blanket phrase. How reports were written to fit the narrative later. He described in staccato bursts the nights when they'd pull over men whose only sin was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. "We told ourselves it kept neighborhoods safe," Miller said, voice raw. "But it's always the same people on the list." Carter watched Miller through the window's reflection. A man hollowed by guilt, hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. For a moment Miller's eyes flicked up, and he looked like a kid caught in something he didn't know how to get out of. "If this leaks the wrong way," Miller whispered, "they'll bury me. They'll make me the scapegoat. But God, if it never comes out, what good are we?" There was no heroism in Miller's voice, only exhaustion and fear. He had put the USB there, and in doing so, had made a choice that could cost him everything. Carter felt the room contract around that choice, the thin hard line between courage and ruin. Carter slid the USB into his pocket, and closed his hand over it like sealing a promise. "We'll look," Carter said, voice low. "We verify, we corroborate, we don't let them clean this up with a pity transfer, and a press release." Miller let out a breath that sounded almost like relief, then regained his composure with a hard nod. Outside, the rain hit the courthouse stone like a steady drum. Inside, the tape of lies and omission had finally been cut. They had victims, they had proof, and for the first time since the pump light had vanished behind him, Carter felt the direction of the fight change. The horror was no longer something only whispered in corners. It was documented, named, and in someone's pocket, fragile, volatile, and utterly dangerous to the people who'd kept it hidden. 3 days later, the courthouse was unrecognizable. The marble floors gleamed under the light of a dozen news cameras. Every seat in the gallery was taken. Reporters shoulder to shoulder with community activists, off-duty cops, and law students clutching notebooks. Outside, barricades strained against the noise of protesters, chanting both for and against the same idea of justice. Inside, The air felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves knew what was about to happen. At the front, Judge Carter Brooks adjusted his robe and glanced across the courtroom. The defendants sat at the table to his right, Officer Derek Collins and Officer Jason Miller, both in uniform. Both under oath. Miller kept his eyes low, his posture rigid. Collins, jaw tight, leaned back in his chair with the kind of arrogance that only came from believing the system still belonged to him. Across the aisle, at the plaintiff's table, sat Sharon Ellis, 34 years old, a black mother of two, dressed in a simple navy blouse. Her hands trembled slightly as she organized her papers, but her gaze was steady. Behind her sat her attorney, a young black woman named Tiana Reyes, no older than 30, her jaw set like stone. Carter took a long breath before speaking. His voice was clear, even, the calm before a storm. "This court will not excuse abuse disguised as law enforcement," he said. "We will hear every truth, however inconvenient." A hush swept the room. Cameras clicked once, then fell silent. Reyes stood, motioned toward Sharon, and said softly, "Please tell the court what happened the night of March 12th. Sharon swallowed hard. She looked at Carter for a moment, the faintest flicker of recognition in her eyes. Then she began. "I was driving home from work," she said. Her voice cracked on the first word but steadied quickly. "I just finished a double shift. My taillight was out, and I planned to fix it the next day. They pulled me over near Franklin Avenue. I thought it was routine. I rolled my window down, kept my hands on the wheel." She paused, breathing through her nose. "I asked what I did wrong." Her voice faltered, then she said it, clear and cutting through the room like glass. "He said, existing. Then he slammed me down." The courtroom went utterly still, even the ceiling fans seemed to stop. Reyes's next words came softly, almost a whisper. "Which officer said that?" "Collins," Sharon said, her eyes shining but unblinking. "The other one, Miller, just looked away. He didn't stop him, didn't say a word." Carter glanced toward the defense table. Collins' smirk faltered for the first time. Miller sat frozen, throat working, eyes fixed on the table.
Reyes continued. "What happened next? He cuffed me," Sharon said. "Pressed my face to the pavement. My cheek still hurts when it rains." My daughter watched from the back seat. She wiped at a tear with the back of her hand, more angry than broken. "They said they had the wrong person. Then they just drove off." A ripple of murmurs ran through the gallery, a low collective sound of disbelief and disgust. Carter tapped his gavel once, a sharp reminder of order. Silence in the court. Reyes stepped aside. "Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to enter into evidence the body cam footage from that night, recovered from internal archives." The lights dimmed, a screen lowered behind the jury box. The video flickered to life, shaky, grainy, the glow of headlights on asphalt. Sharon's voice, trembling, filled the speakers. "I didn't do anything, please." Then Collins' voice, cold, bored, "Then stop acting guilty." The room flinched when the camera caught the moment he threw her against the hood. The metallic thud was louder than it should have been. Someone in the gallery gasped. When the footage ended, the silence was thick enough to choke on. Carter leaned forward. "Officer Collins," he said evenly, "do you dispute this evidence?" Collins cleared his throat, his bravado cracking. "I was following protocol, Your Honor." "She matched a description." "A description?" Carter asked, voice calm but edged. "Which was?" Collins hesitated. "Black female, mid-30s, gray sedan." Carter's eyebrow twitched upward. "That's not a description. That's half the city." Laughter broke from somewhere in the back before dying under the gavel's echo. Reyes turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, the plaintiff would also like to submit supplemental exhibits, records from the Arlington Police Department showing a recurring directive labeled High Risk Zone Enforcement." The clerk carried over the files. Carter flipped through them. The printed maps strikingly familiar, red-pinned neighborhoods, every one of them majority, black or Latino. Across the table, Miller's hands fidgeted. Collins' face went rigid. Carter looked up slowly. "Captain Dempsey authorized these." Reyes nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." Signed and dated by command. It instructed officers to increase patrol visibility and detain when possible. Carter set the file down. He looked directly at the defendants, the weight of his gaze unblinking, deliberate. "This isn't just a case about one woman," he he said. It's about a system that forgot the difference between protection and control. This courtroom will remember that difference. For a moment no one moved. Then somewhere in the back a reporter whispered, "This is history." Carter's gavel struck once more, not for silence, but for gravity. The trial had begun. The next morning the air in the courtroom felt electric, too thick to breathe, too charged to ignore. Everyone knew something was coming. They just didn't know what. Judge Carter Brooks entered, black robe crisp, expression unreadable. He sat, adjusted his glasses, and nodded toward the bench. "Proceed, counselor." Judge Raymond Ellis, acting as special investigator for the court, rose from the witness table. He carried a small silver USB in one hand, the same one Miller had slid across Carter's desk days earlier. The sound of that plastic drive clicking into the computer echoed louder than it should have. The projector hummed to life. Ellis cleared his throat. "Your Honor, what you're about to hear is a recording retrieved from the Arlington Police Department's internal meeting archives. The voice identified has been verified as Captain Frank Dempsey." Carter gave a small nod. "Play it." The first few seconds were static, the dull hum of an office mic left on by accident. Then Dempsey's voice came through, confident, commanding, dripping with authority. "Gentlemen, our stop numbers are down again. That doesn't look good upstairs. I want those numbers up. Increase your stop count. Focus on the south side. We need the activity." A second voice asked, hesitant, "Sir, you mean the black neighborhoods?" A pause, then Dempsey again, lower, sharper. "I didn't say that, but you know what I mean." The courtroom erupted. A tidal wave of whispers, gasps, muttered curses. A woman in the gallery put her hand to her mouth. One of the reporters actually said, "Oh my God." Carter's gavel hit the bench once, sharp, controlled, order, but even he could feel the floor shifting beneath him. The line between corruption and exposure had just been crossed. At the defense table, Miller sat motionless, pale, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the desk. Collins, on the other hand, was unraveling. His neck flushed red, his hands clenched into fists. "You people always make it about race," he suddenly shouted, standing so fast his chair screeched backward. He jabbed a finger toward Sharon Ellis, then at the gallery. "Maybe if you all just followed the damn law for once, we wouldn't have to do our jobs for you." A collective gasp broke out. One of the bailiffs stepped forward instinctively, ready to intervene. But Carter raised a hand, calm, composed, cutting through the noise. He looked straight at Collins, his voice cool as ice. "Thank you, Officer Collins," he said slowly. "You just proved the plaintiff's entire case." The silence that followed was thunderous. Even Collins froze, the realization hitting too late, the anger collapsing into something hollow. Carter leaned forward slightly, his tone measured but piercing. "What we've heard here today is not about one incident. It's about a mindset, one that treats entire communities as quotas and people as statistics. That ends now." Collins sat down heavily, his arrogance gone. Miller didn't look up once. Reyes, the plaintiff's attorney, stood. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly with adrenaline. "Your Honor, we move to submit this recording and all related evidence into the official record." "Granted," Carter said without hesitation. "It will be entered as Exhibit 47. The clerk took the USB and placed it carefully in a sealed envelope. Reporters' pens scratched furiously. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Ellis, still on the stand, looked toward Carter, a brief nod, an unspoken exchange. They both knew what came next. The truth wasn't a rumor anymore. It was documented, broadcast, undeniable, and the system that had tried so hard to protect itself had just been caught on its own tape. Carter adjusted the files before him, his hands steady now, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. "This court," he said, "will recess until tomorrow. But let me make one thing perfectly clear. Justice doesn't stop at the badge." The gavel came down, one clean strike that echoed through the hall. People in the gallery rose all at once, voices breaking into a swell of disbelief and relief. Some clapped, some cried, others just stood there, stunned, as if they'd witnessed something holy and terrible all at once. Outside, the courthouse steps overflowed with noise, reporters shouting, protesters cheering, cameras flashing against a gray afternoon sky. Inside, Carter lingered behind the bench for a moment, eyes on the empty defense table. The words replayed in his mind.
I didn't say that, but you know what I mean. He exhaled slowly. The truth was out, ugly, raw and irreversible, and tomorrow it would demand its price. The final day of the trial dawned gray and heavy, a sky that looked like it hadn't decided yet whether to rain or clear. By the time the courtroom filled, every inch of space was taken. Reporters lined the aisles. TV crews pressed against the doors. Even the stairwells outside were jammed with people trying to listen. Everyone knew history was about to happen. Judge Carter Brooks entered the courtroom slowly, each step deliberate. His robe trailed behind him like a shadow that carried weeks of tension, outrage and hard truth. When he took his seat, no one moved, no one breathed. He looked down at the papers before him, the verdict he'd spent all night drafting by hand. Then he raised his eyes to the room. This court finds officers Derek Collins and Jason Miller guilty of excessive force and violation of constitutional rights. The words hit like a bell, sharp, final. Gasps burst from the gallery, some muffled sobs, some cheers caught in throats. Carter continued, voice steady but ringing through the chamber. Let it be clear, this is not just about two bad officers. It's about a culture built on fear and quotas. A culture that rewards aggression and calls it bravery. A culture that mistakes control for justice. He let that hang, scanning the room, his eyes sweeping over the faces of community members, officers, reporters, and the quiet woman who had started it all, Sharon Ellis. Her hands were clasped tight at her chest, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. Carter leaned forward, his tone lowering, heavy with conviction. That culture ends today. The gavel struck once, not to silence the crowd, but to seal the moment. Then came the sentencing. Officers Collins and Miller are hereby stripped of their badges and terminated from service, effective immediately. Both will face federal prosecution for civil rights violations under Title 18, Section 242. He turned toward the clerk. Furthermore, this court refers the Arlington Police Department and its leadership, including Chief Hensley, for a full investigation by the Department of Justice. The room exploded, reporters shouting, cameras flashing, people standing to their feet, but Carter wasn't finished. He raised his hand, and the sound fell away again. This city will not rebuild trust with words or apologies. Effective immediately, this court orders the creation of the Arlington Community Oversight Commission, an independent civilian body with authority to review complaints, access body cam footage, and make disciplinary recommendations. He paused. This commission will be chaired by this court, until a permanent council is appointed. That last line drew murmurs, people turning to one another, unsure whether they'd heard right. Carter didn't waver. He looked at the two former officers one last time. Collins sat rigid, jaw locked, the defiance gone from his eyes. Miller's head hung low, tears glinting in the corner of his eyes, not for guilt alone, but for the realization of what he'd helped build, and what it had cost. Carter spoke the final words not from the bench, but from something deeper, from the weight of every injustice that had brought them here. Justice isn't blind, he said quietly, letting the silence build around each word. It was looking the other way. From now on it looks back. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then slowly, one person stood, then another. Within seconds, the entire courtroom was on its feet. Applause broke out like thunder, raw, uncontained, echoing off the marble walls. Sharon Ellis pressed her hands to her face and cried openly. Reporters forgot to write. Even Officer Miller, still in cuffs, looked up at Carter, eyes red, voice barely a whisper. Thank you, Your Honor. Carter gave a single nod. Outside, the courthouse steps were alive with the roar of a crowd, signs waving, chants rising, tears mixing with rain. Justice for Sharon. Justice for all. And inside, as the bailiff announced adjournment, Carter remained seated for a moment longer, staring at the seal above the bench. He had said the words every judge dreams of saying, and every citizen had waited too long to hear. Justice had finally opened its eyes. 2 months later, the courthouse that had once felt like a battlefield was quiet again. The protest signs were gone, replaced by construction scaffolding where the city had begun restoring the steps, cracked from too many days of standing, shouting, waiting. But inside, change was already taking root. In a converted City Hall conference room, the first meeting of the Arlington Community Oversight Commission was underway. Folding tables had replaced mahogany desks, coffee cups replaced bottled water, and for once uniforms and civilians sat side by side. At the head of the table sat Judge Carter Brooks, no robe, no gavel, just a man in a rolled-up white shirt, sleeves marked with ink from handwritten notes. He scanned the room. Sharon Ellis, sitting 2 seats down, wearing the same navy blouse she'd worn at trial. Officer Darrell Jackson, the department's first community liaison, taking careful notes, and Jason Miller, no longer in uniform, seated quietly in the back, there by choice, not requirement. The hum of conversation faded as Carter stood. When we started this, he began, most people said it would fade like every other task force, every other promise. But look around this room. The people sitting here today aren't symbols, they're citizens, and they're proof that the law belongs to everyone it protects, or it belongs to no one at all. The words weren't loud, but they landed. Sharon nodded slowly, her expression a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Jackson leaned forward, his pen frozen above the page. Carter continued, his voice softening. Justice doesn't start in a courtroom, it starts in every stop, every decision. Every moment an officer chooses respect over power. It starts when someone refuses to look away. He paused, letting the quiet stretch, the kind of silence that didn't feel empty but full. On the projector behind him, new department statistics flashed. Civilian complaints down 42%, use of force incidents down 37%, community satisfaction up 61%. It wasn't perfection, but it was progress. Carter looked toward Miller in the back. The man's eyes met his, tired but clear. Miller gave a small nod, not seeking forgiveness, only understanding. Outside the window, the streets buzzed with life. Patrol cars rolled past, lights off, windows down, officers waving to the shop owners who waved back. Small ordinary moments, the kind that don't make headlines but quietly rebuild the world. As the meeting adjourned, Sharon lingered. She approached Carter, hesitant. Judge Brooks, she said softly, I used to tell my daughter that justice was just a word. Now I can tell her it's a thing people can see. Carter smiled faintly. Keep telling her that, he said, because it only stays real if people keep looking for it. Later that evening, he drove home through the South Side, the same streets once marked with red pins on Dempsey's high-risk map. The city looked different now. Not because it had changed overnight, but because people were finally paying attention. He stopped at a traffic light. Across the street, a patrol officer stood beside a young black man whose car had broken down. No shouting, no weapons, just 2 people pushing a stalled car to the curb while traffic waited. The light turned green, but Carter didn't move. He watched until the car was safe. Then quietly, he smiled. That night, back home he stood on his porch as the sun sank over Arlington, orange fading into soft blue. The neighborhood was calm. His phone buzzed with new messages from reporters, senators, even the DOJ. He ignored them all. For the first time in months he allowed himself to exhale. He thought of his father, the man who taught him the law was sacred, but flawed. Of Sharon who had the courage to speak. Of Miller, who chose truth over silence. Of every face in that courtroom when the verdict was read. Change was slow, it always was, but for once it was visible. He whispered the same words he'd said on the day that verdict was handed down, this time not to a courtroom but to himself. Steady, certain, and almost at peace. Justice isn't blind, it was looking the other way. From now on, it looks back. And as the porch light flickered on, Carter Brooks turned toward the quiet street, not as a judge chasing fairness, but as a man finally seeing it take root.